anual de relações árabe-judaicas, uma das principais fontes de informações e estudos sobre a dinâmica entre os dois grupos. Ao longo de sua trajetória acadêmica, publicou amplamente sobre o tema, incluindo os volumes Arabs and Jews in Israel, que analisam a complexidade das relações interétnicas no país. A pesquisa do professor Smooha tem sido amplamente reconhecida, recebendo inclusive o Prêmio Israel de Sociologia. Smooha tem sido, em 2008, uma das mais prestigiosas honrarias acadêmicas do país. A professora Aviva Halamis é historiadora e professora emérita da Open University of Israel. Sua pesquisa aborda temas como a história do sionismo, a formação e o desenvolvimento do Yishuv, bem como a história da sociedade israelense, o movimento kibutziano, os movimentos juvenis e a biografia histórica. Entre seus principais trabalhos, destaca-se The Exodus Affair, Holocaust Survivors and the Struggle for Palestine, que analisa o impacto da imigração judaica durante o mandato britânico, e Jerusalem in the Period of the British Mandate, que investiga o papel da cidade no contexto político e social do século XX. Além da sua atuação acadêmica, a professora tem contribuído ativamente para a educação e para o ensino da história, participando de comitês do Ministério de Educação de Israel, ministrando cursos de formação para professores e servindo como chefe dos estudos de história na Open University of Israel. Antes de passar a palavra à professora, eu tenho uma observação técnica para vocês. Para ouvir a interpretação em português, vocês têm que clicar na barra inferior do computador, na opção Interpretação. E para fazer perguntas, clicar no botão Q&A, que é Questions and Answers. Ok? Eu passo a palavra agora à professora Aviva Halamis. Aviva Zeitach.
Good evening. I'm very pleased to be here and talk with you. And the topic of my lecture is Israel's contemporary left in historical perspective. Now, I would like to start with a statement. I would say, breaking news. There is no left in contemporary Israel. I would say no left has been left on Israel's political map. And I mean left in the universal traditional sense. This statement requires to clarify some definitions so we'll all be on the same page. So I need your help to share slide number 1 to see what is the common universal definition of political left. The term left originally indicated a socialist worldview. Okay. Indicate a socialist worldview of society that involves a concern for those in society perceived as disadvantaged relative to others, as well as a belief that there are unjustified inequalities that needs to be reduced or abolished through radical means that change the nature of society. Can we see this next one? Nowadays, left-wing commonly means a social, economic, and political philosophy that support political and economic democracy and a gradualist, reformist, and democratic approach toward achieving social equality, and generally support secularization and the separation of church and state. Now we turn to Israel and we ask, who are you, contemporary Israel left? The identification of a person or a group as a leftist in Israel depends primarily on their position vis-a-vis the question of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This, the essence of this leftist position is a willingness to territorial compromise over the territories occupied during the Six-Day War, namely the two-state solution. And if we move, okay, we are synchronized, okay. Other characteristics of leftist orientation are the desire to appropriately settle the two components of Israel's character, Jewish and democratic, by giving the Jewish definition a democratic content, and in most cases, loyalty to secular values. I illustrate this definition by quoting the author and historian Fania Oz Salzberger. She's the daughter of Amos Oz, a renowned Israeli writer and left-wing public figure. And Professor Fania Oz Salzberger wrote on November 1st, 2023, which is less than a month after the October 7 atrocities. And that's what she said on that occasion. I was and remain on the Israeli left. I still believe that it is necessary to reach a border-determining agreement with the Palestinian Authority, pending a two-state solution, to evacuate Jewish settlements in the West Bank, to defend Israel powerfully and wisely from within its sovereign territory recognized by international law, to strive for equal rights for Jewish and Arab citizens, invest in social justice, and establish a liberal, moderate, and value-oriented social democracy here. So we can skip the sharing. And back to my declaration that there is no left in contemporary Israel. How did we get to this unique political vacuum? I will try first to tackle the question why a real left in its universal meaning never emerged in Israel. Then I will ponder at the fate of the Israeli left and its current meaning. We'll move on the time axis, past, present, and I will also try to talk a little bit about the future. I take the risk. The time frame is from the beginning of the British mandate over Palestine in the early 1920s to the present. The rationale behind the starting point is that it was during the mandate period, the pre-state period, that the foundation of Israel's political map and system were laid. So now we're going to the past. Well, you know, there are 50 shades of left. Still, there are basically two kinds of left in Israel. One is Zionist, and the other is, I would say, non, or even anti-Zionist. So it's either this or that. The historical Zionist left endeavored to combine Zionism and socialism. All parts of Zionist left raised two flags, national and social. In other words, Zionist and socialist. If we can see the next slide, the most important force of the pre-state Zionist left was Mapai, the ruling party from 1933 up to 1977. Mapai advocated constructivist socialism, which is, let's say, on one foot, cooperation between the classes in the building of the country by establishing a new national economy from bottom up, skipping the stage of class struggle and revolution. If we move ahead, to its left, to the left of Mapai, was Shomer HaTzair, that later was Mapam. I know it's a little bit confusing, Mapai and Mapam, but Mapai is the ruling party. It's more to the center relatively, and Mapam is more to the left. So the ideology of Shomer HaTzair and Mapam combined Zionism with socialism in one of its revolutionary Marxist version. And the social basis of this party was its kibbutzim, and I will get back to the kibbutzim later on. If we move ahead, the next slide. The Jewish community in pre-state Palestine was a national liberation movement going through a period of crisis, a period of national emergency in two fronts. One is the deteriorating situation of the Jews in Europe, and the other, the intensifying struggle between Jews and Arabs over Palestine. It was obvious that as long as the emergency situation prevails, Zionism has the upper hand in ideology and in practice, an axiom relevant for both pre-state period and after the establishment of the State of Israel. All factions of socialist Zionism gave both precedence, which is time-wise, and priority, value-wise, to the national wing, meaning Zionists, in their ideology, and even more so in practice. If we move for a little bit, please go back one slide, 10, number 10. Okay. Now to the non-Zionist left, namely the communists. It was a class party that strived for cooperation between the Arab and the Jewish working class. But despite its efforts, most of its members were Jewish. I'll give you just a little bit of a data and then we'll leave them alone because they don't really have an influence, significant influence on the history of the Jewish community in pre-state Palestine. So at any given time, there were about 400 members of the Communist Party. And in totally during the mandate period, the party had about 5,000 members, of which only about 600 were Arabs and several dozens Armenian. Now, there was a red line in the pre-state Jewish community, the Yeshuv, that crossing it meant being out of the confines of the Zionist circle. The stripe, so that this red line contains 2 points. One, a strive to achieve a Jewish majority, and opposing the restriction of immigration. For the communists, socialism was unequivocally of top priority. Therefore, during the pre-state period, they were outside of the boundaries of the Zionist consensus. I would just say in parentheses, they were also outlawed by the British authorities. So they really had a hard time to function and to do their activity during the mandate period. All in all, as I said, the communists had no influence on the history of the pre-state Jewish society. Now, 2 main obstacles prevented the emergence of a genuine left in the pre-state period. One is the Arab and I would say Jewish/Zionist struggle, and the primacy of national goals over social ones. The discrepancy between national and social goals was manifested in the activity of 2 Zionist left organs. If we move to the next slide, the first is the Histadrut. Histadrut, the General Federation of actually Jewish laborers, but they called it Histadrut HaKlalit Shel HaPoalim HaIvrim, which means the Hebrew laborers in Palestine. The Histadrut was founded in 1920, and it was a countrywide labor organization that fulfilled a wide range of functions. It operated as a trade union, and at the same time, it was an employer. It ran a job placement agency. It was involved in settlement activity, had its own economic institution, including a bank, an insurance company, and a pension fund, and also provided healthcare. It had its own education system, a daily newspaper, publishing house, a theater group, and conducted a variety of cultural activities. The extensive activity of the Histadrut led to the dependence of workers on its institution. In case of conflict of national and class interests, the Histadrut always assigned primacy to the national ones. I'll give you an example. The Histadrut supported continuous Jewish immigration even when the flow of newcomers were against the interest of the working class. Unlike other immigrant countries, where in times of economic depression, the trade unions were among the leading restrictive forces, as was the case in the United States in the 30s, the Histadrut supported large-scale Jewish immigration even when unemployment was high, and that's because the main goal was to achieve Jewish majority in Palestine. Now, since the early 1930s, Mapai, you remember her? Mapai, with I at the end, which controlled the Histadrut, was the dominant political force in the Yishuv. We can stop sharing. So it was the dominant political parties in the Yishuv and also in the Zionist organization. So the Histadrut contemplated complemented the authority of the Yishuv national leadership and did not challenge it on social issues. Another surprise might be the claim that the kibbutz, along its invaluable role in the development of the Jewish national home, it was in matters of settlement, security, and immigrants' absorption. So along all these features, the kibbutz was not an asset to the development of the Zionist left. If we can share the screen again, from the very beginning, kibbutz members and the urban working class, the two main pillars of the Israeli working class and the natural base for building a political Zionist left. So these two, the kibbutz members and the urban working class, did not share common class interests. Therefore, actually, the kibbutz was a hindrance rather, or I would say more than a catalyst to the development of a genuine socialist left in Israel, just as Marx asserted that a property-owning proletariat would be hesitant about mounting the barricades of the class struggle. Karl Marx, viewed projects such as the kibbutz as diverting revolutionary energy from the political and trade union struggle that must be conducted in the country center and centers of political power and industry, and he depicted them as castles in the air. In fact, the utopian features of the kibbutz, its existence as a rural community based on agriculture, and its role in the national liberation movement containing elements of romanticism, made it a form of non-Marxist and even anti-Marxist socialist enterprise. Now we move forward on the timeline, and next question I would like to talk about is what happened after the establishment of the State of Israel. Wait, you're running too fast. From 1948 until the late 1980s, political map of Israel was composed of three political blocks. I don't know if to start with the left or with the right, but it was left, right, and religious. Now we can move to the slide that of the elections to the first Knesset. So in that election, the Zionist left got the majority of seats. If you see those parties that are in red, Mapai, Mapam, Maki, the communist, the Democratic List of Nazareth, that's an Arab list affiliated with Mapai. So actually, Mapai and Mapam together already had 65 seats in the Knesset, and you know, in the Knesset there are 120 members, that actually the left had more than 50% of the seats. So mathematically, it was possible to form a leftist government. But Israel's first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion, decided to leave Mapam out of the government and to form a coalition with, in addition to his own party Mapai, the Religious Front, the Progressives, that's a centrist liberal party, the Sephardim List, and the satellite Arab List associated with Mapam. Now I can tell you that ever since 1949, historians and others cannot refrain from contemplating what could have happened if, but you know, in history we don't play with ifs, but you know, who knows? Ben-Gurion's decision was in line with a slogan he had coined in 1933, from a class to a nation, meaning that he aspired to attract to his party that was essentially a workers' party. He wanted to attract to this party people from all social classes in order to fulfill the first and foremost the national Zionist goals. Over the years, Mapai moved from, I would say, closer to the center of the political map, leaving only Mapam on the Zionist left slot. The communists were totally excluded, I would say excommunicated from being part of the coalition. A famous declaration by Ben-Gurion says, all parties are legitimate potential coalition partners, except for Herut, that's Begin's party, and that's on the right, and Maki, the Communist Party on the left. The ban on the right-wing Herut was lifted in 1967, we'll get to it in a few minutes, but the communists are disqualified to serve in the government until these very days. Mapam sat on the opposition benches until 1955, and staying in the political desert took a heavy toll on the left. Kept away from the decision-making circles, Mapam was consumed by internal ideological and political rifts, struggles, and splits that distracted it from taking part in the central process the Israeli society experienced at that time, that of immigrants' absorption. Furthermore, the party was immersed at the time in admiration for the Soviet Union. The left Soviet orientation alienated many new immigrants, first from the Muslim countries, and later on from Soviet Union, and then later on from the former Soviet Union, being yet another factor in the waning of the left's political appeal and power. Nevertheless, Mapam maintained its adherence to the Zionist order of priorities, as manifested every day on the front page of its daily newspaper. On the left corner of the newspaper, there was the slogan for Zionism, socialism, and the brotherhood of the nations. And I will insist in that order: Zionism, socialism, and the brotherhood of the nations. In the first 3.5 years of statehood, the population of Israel was more than doubled by mass immigration, first mainly from Europe, Holocaust survivors, and then from Muslim countries, mainly Yemen, Iraq, and North Africa. In those trying years, Mapai, as the ruling party, led an unprecedented project, I would say verging, in my mind, on hubris, of bringing hundreds of thousands of Jews to a young state. For a long time, many of the new immigrants voted for Mapai in spite of the hardship they experienced, and they did so out of feelings of gratitude and because they were dependent on the ruling party in various spheres of life. During and after the Great Immigration Tide, tensions arose between the new immigrants who lived in transit camps and later in development towns and the nearby kibbutzim. And that's another cause for the decline of the left. Now, if we move a little bit further to slide 14, we are in the mid-60s. 14. Okay. In the mid-1960s, it seemed that the national emergency period was over. the very existence of Israel was no longer in jeopardy, and there were no Jewish communities around the world under acute threat. There were signs that Israel was on its way to recover from the crisis of its early years, entering a stage of healing. The residents of the transit camps moved to permanent housing. The immigrants became more and more, though slowly, integrated into Israeli society, and the personal economic situation was improving. And then came the 1967 Six-Day War and halted those positive processes. Since 1967, and even more so after the right came to power in 1977, much of the governmental attention and resources were shifted from the state within the Green Line, the pre-1967 borders, to the occupied territories. Clearly, the vast investment in the occupied territories came at the expense of development town, and I don't know exactly how to say it. In Hebrew, they call it the neighborhoods of the big cities, but actually the slums in the cities. From the outset, Israeli society was an overburdened society torn by a multitude of divisions: Jews and Arabs, religious, secular, Ashkenazim, Mizrahim, and don't forget the haves and have-nots. The results of the Six-Day War intensified some of these cleavages and added another one: the dispute over the future of the territories conquered during the war. This issue turned to be the central one in Israeli politics. The terms right and left in Israeli politics received a new connotation, and today these issues serve as the litmus paper of political identity. Hence is my contention that the Six-Day War was a decisive point in Israel history and marks the beginning of the left demise. I would say one more word about the Six-Day War and the consequences of the Six-Day War. And it doesn't belong directly to the topic, but I have to say, since that in my mind, the Six-Day War was the second worst event in the history of the Jewish people in the 20th century. And you know, of course, which one is the first one. And not everywhere where I say this statement, people like it, but I insist on it. Anyway, the full impact of the Six-Day War consequences became evident only a few years later, and the observation that the Six-Day War was the watershed, or the turning point in Israel's political history, became clear only in retrospect. Now, after the Six-Day War, the admired defense minister, Moshe Dayan, I guess many of you remember his name, and he belonged to Mapai, which is actually was still a leftist party. He formulated a slogan: "It is not feasible to raise two flags at the same time, the flag of security and the flag of social justice." And it was quite clear what are the conclusions. Both Mapai, soon to become the Labour Party, and Mapam to its left, complied with this order of priorities, a mutual consent that paved the way to forming the alignment, Hama'arach, that combined Mapai and Mapam, or Mapai turned to be the Labour Party, and that was the ruling party until 1977. On the left wing, who was left on the left wing? The communists, and some fractional groups formed by people who were disappointed by Mapam's rightward move. To say the truth, during that period, there was no real leftist opposition to the government. Though Mapam disagreed with many of the Labour Party's positions on socioeconomic and security and political issues. So in spite of that, Mapam avoided rocking the boat and made tireless efforts to maintain its political accord with the Labour Party, thus diluting the political left. Between the two wars, the Labour-Mapam alignment was at its prime. In the 1969 election, the Ma'arach of Mapam and Mapai received a record of 56 seats in the Knesset, which is almost 50%. Okay, now we're still in the period between 1967 and 1973. Actually, until late 1970, Israel was actually in a state of war, the war of attrition with Egypt. Soon after a ceasefire with Egypt came into effect, a social protest broke out, led by the Black Panthers, a group of Jews from Muslim countries. The Labour-Mapam government, led by Golda Meir, overlooked the protest. Well remembered is Golda Meir's allegation that the Black Panthers are not nice guys. This haughty reaction increased the alienation of the Mizrahi Jews from the labor camp. The left overlooked the opportunity to join forces with the Black Panthers, who were socialist orientation with no religious inclination. Ultimately, the Mizrahi protest dealt the left a double blow. First, one of the Black Panthers leaders, Charlie Beaton, joined the non-Zionist Communist Party Hadash, thus ruling himself out of the legitimate left. Then, after the failure of the Black Panthers protest, the political organization of the Mizrahim took on a religious character. It is widely agreed upon that religious sentiments determined, to a very great extent, the political position of most of the Mizrahi Jews. They conceived the left as secular, disrespecting their religious sentiments, while the right, from Herut led by Begin to the present Likud, were sympathetic to their religious attitude. The rise of the Mizrahi ethnic parties dealt another blow to the left, first with the short-lived Tami party, which eventually emerged into right-wing Likud, and from 1984, Shas, a Haredi ultra-Orthodox Oriental religious party. At the outset, Shas took a moderate position on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, served in the labor governments, and supported arriving at peace with the Arab states. Later on, Shas took a hawkish political stance, and the party has become an integral part of the right bloc. The explanation for the rise of Shas and the strengthening of the Likud also lies in the weakening of the Histadrut. In the 1990s, the Histadrut was transformed into a merely trade union. If you remember, it has many other functions. But in the 1990s, it was stripped of all its function except for being a trade union, and thus stripping it of other areas of activity. Those spheres of activity that allowed the Histadrut, and actually Mapai, to control many areas of the life of the country's citizens. Moreover, the kind of organizational tools that in the past helped to unite the ranks around the left have been assumed or adopted by other elements like Shas, whose methods of operation have many similarities to past socialist Zionism methods, those of creating dependence on political institutions. For example, Shas established its own, but its government-funded education system, which became popular in poor Sephardic towns, increasing the party's popular support. Now we have to take a step back. We came to 1984, but now we have to go back to the 1977 political upheaval. As I mentioned before, right before the Six-Day War, the right received a boost of legitimacy. Herut, headed by Menachem Begin, which had not been counted as a partner in the government ever since the state was established. So on the eve of the Six-Day War, this party was invited to join a wide national unity government. 3 years later, as a protest against, if you remember, I told you in summer of 1970, there was a ceasefire between Egypt and Israel. Chwarts was opposed, was against this ceasefire, and as a protest of the government decision, Chwarts left the government, and thus Chwarts ridding itself from any direct responsibility to the failures preceding the Yom Kippur War. The electoral impact of the Yom Kippur War came about 4 years later in the 1977 elections, if you can see the results. Okay. Again, those in red are considered left. The Ma'arach, Hadash, which is a more or less communist party, Shelley Camp, the United Arab List, and Ratz. And then those in brown are more center parties, centrist parties. Now, if you look at the results, actually, the 1977 election, more than being a victory of the right, it was a defeat of the left. The voters that deserted the Labor Ma'arach did not vote for the Likud. They voted, or they switched to the new centrist liberal democratic movement for change, in short, DASH. So actually what the 1977 election, they caused a dramatic change in the pattern of Israel's political map. Until 1977, Mapai, or the Labor, was situated in such a position that enabled it to form a coalition with parties either to its left or to its right. For 30 years, there has been a clear hegemonic or even dominant party, Mapai and then Labor, and since 1977, no party has been in such a dominant position. Now, while in power, the Likud played on the strings of past discrimination on ethnic grounds to recruit Mizrahi voters by inciting them against the left. Rather than making efforts to heal the wounds and look forward, the right has been amplifying the animosity against the left based on past grievances, though by now, if we do the calculation, the right has been in power for a longer period than the left. As we move forward on the timeline, people shifted their support from the left to various centrist parties from 1977 Dash to contemporary Yesh Atid, Yair Lapid, and Hamachaneh HaMamlachti, Benny Gantz, and those parties that many people call them mood parties. You know, people change their mood. They said, oh, this time we'll vote for this party, the other time we'll vote another party in the center. So these mood parties are, as we see, are known by the names of their leaders. And it is doubtful whether the ordinary Israeli can point to their political, God forbid, ideological positions. Anyway, these parties evidently cannot be considered left-wing in the universal sense of the term. In fact, they are not left-wing parties even in the Israeli sense. As to the right wing, it was gaining more and more power by the consistent loyalty of the religious parties. Before 1967, and even a few years afterwards, the Zionist Religious Party and the ultra-Orthodox parties were natural partners to Mapai and Labor. The Zionist the Zionist religious were active members in the government as cabinet minister, and the religious ultra-Orthodox parties supported the government from the outside. Since the Six-Day War, the occupation of the occupation of the West Bank and the establishment of Jewish settlements, the Hitnachluyot, and even more so since 1977, the Zionist religious parties and the ultra-Orthodox ones are situated firmly in the right camp, tilting the political scale to the right. Another significant change in the face of the political map, the Israeli political map, is the emergence of Arab parties in 1988. Now, if you still remember, I started my historical survey by presenting three political blocks: right, left, and religious. As we have seen, the religious bloc merged into the right one. And now the three blocks are right, left, and Arab. Now we have to ask to what extent the Arab bloc is part of the left. The new Arab bloc was an asset for the left for a short time only. After the victory of the Labour Party in 1992, with Yitzhak Rabin heading the Ma'arach, the Labour Ma'arach, the Arab Democratic Party joined the left obstructive bloc, supporting the government from the outside. The reliance of Rabin government on the support of an Arab party in the approval of the Oslo Peace Accord was considered an unforgivable sin by the Israeli right, depicting Rabin as a traitor. And what happened later, we all know. In 2021, the Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid government again relied on the outside support of an Arab party, Ra'am in this case, and was too castigated by the right. Currently, the leaders of the centrist parties and Yair Lapid and Benny Gantz, and also Naftali Bennett, who is not in the Knesset at this time, but is considered one of the promises of the next election, with his party that wasn't even founded yet, getting many seats in the Knesset, and he is considered as one of the candidates to be the prime minister. So the leaders of the center and Naftali Bennett declare they will never form a coalition with any Arab party and not even rely on their external support. This stand excludes any option of having a center and left to the center government. The improbability of the Arabs to be an asset for the left stems not only from their bearing by the right and center, but also because of a low voting rate among the Arab citizens of Israel. Had the Arabs been represented in the Knesset according to their demographic weight, 20%, the picture might have been different. Now we go to the present. I started my talk claiming that there has never been left in its universal, traditional sense in Israel. As we have seen in the last few minutes, today, there is hardly any left, even in the unique Israeli sense of the term. Let's look at the political blocs in the Knesset today. Where is the left? There are 4 members of the Labour Party. There are 10 Arabs, and not necessarily all of them are left, because Ra'am is actually a religious party. So that we have set 2. Actually, today, we have 2 blocks. We have the slide 16. Actually, today, we have 2 blocks. I put them in quotation marks, you know. We have one block in favor of Benjamin Netanyahu's continued tenure as prime minister, and a block opposed to Netanyahu's continued tenure. The left is, of course, part of the second one, but only as a marginal factor. While one may argue that the end of Netanyahu's regime is an ultimate condition, even though not sufficient, for a reshuffle of the political map of Israel, still, it will not lead to forming a center-left strong enough power relying around the two-state solution for the Palestinian problem. Having Netanyahu out of the political arena might even strengthen the right, since parties like Israel Beiteinu and others, which rules out any partnership with Netanyahu, will join forces with the Likud. And now I'm taking the risk to talk a little bit about the future. Analyzing the 2022 election results raised the question whether it was an accident or do they reflect the current political map and indicate its shape in the future. If we can see the next slide, in the popular vote, there was an almost tie. If you see, it's a few thousand votes, which I would say it's almost on. It was a tie with almost, which I would say verge on even a statistical error. But when it comes to this number of seats in the Knesset, the right has a clear majority. How comes? The left lost 6 to 7 seats because two parties did not pass the electoral threshold due to internal rivalries in the Arab list and the refusal of the Labour Party chair to run together with left-wing Meretz. The 2022 election results reflect a double symptom of the left fatal, I would say, fatal weakness. Its chronic tendency to split and the absence of agreed upon and attractive leader. The idea that the 2022 elections were an accident is probably a wishful thinking because of two reasons. One, the demographic factor that steadily increases the reservoir of right-wing voters. The other is the delegitimation of the Arab parties as potential partners to the coalition. And finally, what is the impact of October 7th? After the Hamas murderous attack on Israel, many Israelis, including leftists, expressed delusion of any chance to have an agreement with the Palestinians, actually magnifying the declaration by the then Prime Minister Barak that after the failure of the Camp David conference in 2000 said that there was no partner for peace. The distressing truth is that indeed, even before October 7, the Palestinians did not make it easy for the left to gain power. The tragic example is, of course, the terrorist actions and the Second Intifada, which shook the Oslo Agreement and gave an almost deadly blow to Israel's left, making the chances of reviving the left slimmer. Now, what I did in the last few minutes was an attempt to peer through the crystal ball, which is not so clear. It's even though we say the crystal ball. And we as historians say, listen, it's not easy to predict, even more so when it comes to the future. So at this point, I make do with supplying food for thought about the future, leaving you maybe with more question marks than providing exclamation marks. Thank you.
So we have one question from him. I think you can ask, and if you can.
From you? But how will I?
Yeah. I think you can repeat the question.
Who will repeat it?
You.
Yeah, but if it's in Portuguese, I want.
No, English.
English.
Ah, sure.
Maybe you can repeat the question and then answer.
Say the question.
Actually.
How do you relate the situation of the Israeli left today, no left, to the Western world left? Are there any relationship or local issues are more important to each one?
Say it again.
How do you relate the situation of the Israeli left today, no left,
Mhm.
to the Western world left? Are there any relationship or local issues are more important to each one?
Okay, so I have to repeat it.
If you can, how you understand?
So the question is how to relate the situation in Israel that no left is left to the situation in other countries, the status of the left in other countries where I didn't get you mean where national interests are more important than social?
I mean that maybe the national or local issues are more important than the universal issues of the left.
Yeah, I see. So first of all, one of, it's not only that the left in Israel is a unique left because of its part of a national liberation movement that's still the situation of war and conflict with its neighbors and with the Palestinians is not over yet. I don't think that the Israeli left is having universal attitude toward other to cases in other countries.
The left agenda.
You hardly find statements or discussions of the Israeli left about situations in other countries, supporting the left in other countries on the basis of common ideological beliefs. So I would say that the Israeli left is much immersed in its own problems and is not really open to but and I don't, today I don't even know to how many international organizations the Israeli left still belongs. First of all, so who is the left? People from Meretz, that is, and in some organizations they also they boycott Israel, so they really cannot. But years ago, representative of the left were part of all kind of leftist gathering like Pietro Nenni in Italy, but today, and that's especially after 1967, the left in Israel is, I would say, is busy with its own issues and is not really part of any universal worldwide left. And also in many cases when the Israeli policy toward cases that actually the left has to be against, it doesn't really raise its voice. Like I would say years ago when in South Africa, even before the Mandela, so Israel sold weapons to South Africa. It wasn't popular to say, listen, it shouldn't be done. It's also because of security matters, and Israel has to find friends as much as she can. And if it's against some socialist ideals, what can you do?
Thank you.
So Sergio Goldbaum asked, could you please say something about demographic trends and the political prospect in Israel?
The demographic trends? Yeah. Okay, as I mentioned, you see, they say, if you look at a family of leftist Israeli, they have 2 kids and a dog, okay? And maybe 3 kids. When you look at families of the right, the ultra-Orthodox and Mizrahi families, they are large families. And it's interesting to note that in the Arab population, the natural increase is going down. So, today there are no real amount of new immigrants, but the immigrants that come from the former Soviet Union, many of them are tending to the right. There is immigration from France, which is of Jews that actually are Oriental Jews that came to France from Morocco, and many of them are also rightist. So the reservoir of the left is much slimmer than that of the right, and that's something that there is nothing to do to prevent it, unless, you know, when Benjamin Netanyahu was the finance minister in 2003, and he decided to cut some of the allowances that are given to families with many children, and you could see how the birth rate in the ultra-Orthodox families went down. So it's a matter of policy of the government. If they decide to say, for example, you get assistance from the family, from the government until the fourth child, and then it's on your own, and maybe that. But at this point, the demographic, I would say, the demographic crystal ball is in favor of the right.
Your presentation were mostly about partisan politics, focused on the parties. I wonder about the social movements. So a couple of years ago, there was a very large movement about the cost of living that mobilized many people. And more recently, we had that against the judicial reforms, and which might be turning into maybe a kind of revolt. So I wonder to what extent the partisan politics reflect the trends within society.
To what extent?
Yes.
You say, I have to repeat it? Or? You see, in Israel, there is a lot of extra parliamentary activity. Let's say it started with movements like Shalom Achshav after the peace agreement with Egypt. And the fact is that this ex-parliamentary movements and protests is not, I would say, translated into political power that you feel it in the ballots. So, for example, the people that are, I tell you, from January 2023 until today, before I left to my trip, every Saturday night, I didn't have to think what movie I'm going to see, what theater I'm going to, because I was on the streets, first with the judiciary reform or whatever, and now with, but if you look at the people that gather in this protest, they are not all of the same, skin of it's hard to even, I don't know if there is any analysis or statistical data to what did they vote in the last election. When it started with the protest against the judiciary upheaval, I would say, so many people said if all these people that are here in the street bother themselves to go to vote on November 2022, the situation might be different. So to the best of my understanding, you see most of these protests are also mostly a one-issue protest. Like in 2011, it was against the cost of living, and that's where Yair Lapid founded his party. And I don't see that let's say that this protest has a flavor of left claims, but I don't see Yair Lapid being a protector or someone who's trying to push an agenda of social justice. And so I would say that I would distinguish between the protest, which is very impressive. People came to protest every single Saturday, and today, it's every day. But it's hard to know how it's going to be, how it will be reflected in the elections. At least, in particular, we don't know yet who will be the parties that run in 20, I don't know when sometimes we say, we don't know when the next election will take place. And some people say, we don't know if the next election will take place.
I think that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. It was challenging.
Então, pessoal, a gente agradece muito. Vamos fazer agora um intervalo de 10 minutos para cada um poder tomar um café, ir no banheiro e logo voltamos com o Sammy Smooha, que vai apresentar também a conferência dele. Então, nos encontramos 7h40.
Caffè molti, caffè molti.
Caffè.
Caffè molti.
נעלם לי העץ שלי.
העץ שלך?
כן.
בעיה.
פארקר.
Good evening. I am Sammy Smooha, professor from University of Haifa. I am a sociologist dealing with ethnicity and with politics. I study divisions in Israeli society and also study Israeli democracy in comparison with other democracies in the West, and not just generally in the West, but where there is a deeply divided society. Deeply divided society means that there is a minority, significant minority, which rejects the basic ideology of the state and is in conflict with the majority and with the state. Now, what I am going to tell you what is my message, so you can follow better my message. My message is that the left we heard about, the Zionist left, which created Israel, in fact created a right-wing society and a right-wing state. It's not only failed as a left, but it failed to create a state and a society in direction of the left. So it is a right-wing society in its structure of both, and also the state is in its structure. I will try to show you that. So it is not an accident that Israel today is dominated by the left. It's not an accident. By the right, because it was created as a right-wing society and state. I'll try to show you that. My other message is, what you think of Israeli democracy, what you think of Israeli democracy is different what I'm going to present you. My Israeli democracy is different than the way it is perceived and conceived by Israel and also elsewhere. That's my two messages. Doesn't go. Okay. Let's start with this. What is democracy? Democracy is, first of all, a procedural democracy. It's a set of procedures how to do things more peacefully, how to manage politics peacefully, how you choose your leaders, that they will make the decisions for society. And these are the features of procedural democracy: civil rights for all, separation of power, rule of law, usually multi-part system, free elections, and then you can change the government from one election to another, impartial judiciary, so not corrupted, and the army is under control. Okay, this is, I say, the textbook democracy. Okay, but this is only procedural democracy. It's not liberal democracy that we talk about about the West. What is liberal democracy? Liberal democracy, like any other democracy, has all the features of procedures. Without it, you don't have anything. But it's not enough. Liberal democracy is a democracy which promotes values in addition to procedures, like equality between citizens, freedom, dignity, justice, fairness. So the state does something to promote all these values in addition to procedures how to choose your leaders. And also liberal democracy, in fact, helps the individual to fulfill its what we call self-autonomy, its talents, its interest, and so forth. And also, it protects human rights. It's not only you give you rights in procedural democracy, you get rights, but liberal democracy protects these rights, has all kinds of mechanisms to protect these rights. So that's the idea. And especially the test of liberal democracy is protecting minority rights and individuals, because you don't have to protect majority rights because they have the power, the majority. Okay? Now the question is, what kind of democracy is Israel? Is it just procedural or is it also liberal? Okay? That's the question I'm asking. Now let's take, first of all, what kind of liberal democracies we have in the world, in the West today. Most of the Western countries are liberal democracies, but of Republican kind. In other words, these are countries like Germany, France, or US, or United States, that they give individual rights and they protect individual rights. That's the idea. They don't recognize ethnicity, they don't recognize religion, doesn't matter to them. All of them are equal regardless of their background. That's the idea of liberal, Republican liberal democracy. But there are few countries in the West which are not of this kind. They are power-sharing democracies. Democracies which recognize ethnicity, recognize religions, whatever, and they say we are going to give these minorities, linguistic or religious minority, we give them special rights, what we call collective rights. And these are countries like Belgium, which has two ethnic or linguistic groups. Switzerland has 3 to 4, and they recognize each one, and each one in Switzerland you have cantons where they can exercise their language, their education, and so on. But there are very few countries like that. Now, all these ethnic groups are equal, and they get their power in proportion to their size. So these are also liberal democracies, but with power-sharing apparatus. And the Republican, they don't have this power-sharing. It's all free competition, and they protect the minorities, they protect the individuals, and so on. Okay? Now the question is where Israel stands. Now, no, this is, can I get back to here? Okay, that's back.
I think it's in Hebrew, it's inverted.
This is back?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, there is I created a model in 1990, struggling with how I conceive Israeli democracy. I said, okay, is Israel liberal democracy? And then I had all kinds of restrictions or limitation to see it as liberal, okay, and any kind of liberal. Now, I had no problem with the procedural democracy. Israel is a democracy, so it's a procedural. That's the most basic thing. So I couldn't see Israel as liberal. So I said, what kind then? I said, there is another type of democracy, which I created. I called it ethnic democracy. Okay. Now let's define ethnic democracy. No, this is not. Okay, defining ethnic democracy. So ethnic democracy is a procedural democracy. Everyone has rights and all the freedoms, all this, like a free election. But in ethnic democracy, there is ethnic majority, and the ethnic majority controls the state. That's the idea. So it's not that you have free competition of individuals and parties and the minority and majority. No, there is no free competition. Always the ethnic majority in control of society and state. That is the kind of democracy. And so I'm talking about ethnic majority and ethnic minority. So there is a real division between majority and so it's very clear then there is contradiction. On the one hand, you have equality between citizens, right? That's procedural democracy and a free competition for power. On the other hand, you have one group, which is the majority, that controls everything. So there is a clear contradiction. I said, this is the way, this is the essence of ethnic democracy, the contradiction, the way it operates. Okay, let me now elaborate on ethnic democracy. I said, ethnic democracy is based on three principles. One principle, there is ethnic dominance, ethnic ascendancy, superiority. It's not just, it's formal. In many sense, it is formal even. That the ethnic majority owns and rules the state. So there is no real equality. Secondly, its policies, the government policy is to ensure the continued power of the majority. That the ethnic minority will not revolt, will not do a lot of things which disrupt the system. That's one thing, that the superiority, I call it ascendancy of the majority. The second is that the ethnic majority feels threatened. There are threats to the majority. What are the threats? The ethnic majority feels threats to its survival as a majority, or as to security, to its culture, and to its well-being. So there is a threat to the majority. And also, the majority believes that the way to deal with the threats is to take over the state. So the state is an instrument to deal with the threats that the majority feels. So you don't have ethnic democracy without threats over to the majority. And the third principle is that there is a combination of democratic and non-democratic rights. The majority gets all the rights, no problem in ethnic democracy. There are majority rights, not only the minority rights. You have majority rights. The majority has rights, and but at the same time, also the minority has civil rights and individuals. So that's all done. And I'm saying something even more than that, that the minority can wage struggles for change. It's not because it's democracy. So they have the right to organize and to have parties or to have social movements and to change the system. But they cannot really change the system because there is an absolute dominance of the majority. Now, so this is the second part of the rights. There is a majority dominance. Majority dominance. It's not democratic. So on the one hand, there is democracy, that the minority can struggle democratically, peacefully, and can improve its situation. But at the same time, there is absolute dominance of the majority. Okay, is this clear? What is the model? This is the model. Now the model is more elaborated, and I don't have the time to do because I developed the model also as a theory. The theory says, okay, under what conditions such a system emerges? It's not all why in the West we don't have this in other countries. So there are some countries which develop this kind of it. So it's really talking about what are the historical conditions for such a system to emerge. And also the big question is how the system continues to exist. Because there is a real problem here of stability. Because the minority will not accept the system. The whole system is against the minority. So the minority will not stay idle. It will struggle and maybe will destroy the system or change the system and so forth. So I had in the theory, what are the features, what are the conditions for stability of the system? For example, one, you can see here the list of the conditions. One, that the size of the minority does not grow. So demographically, that the minority will not grow. Suppose if the minority say 10% and they become 30%, they will not accept this. They will revolt and they will change the system. So there are all kinds of features which I don't have to talk. Now, before I move to see what kind of Israel we have, let me just go very quickly about the criticism of the model. This model was criticized on both sides, from the left and right. They don't like this one. Okay. First of all, they say, look, this is really oxymoron. This means you say ethnic democracy. You say democracy, but then you said ethnic ascendancy, ethnic superiority. So this do not go together. So they said, look, you created a concept which simply does not make sense. Okay. There is another criticism. They say, look, what the hell about this ethnic democracy? I mean, this is a really liberal democracy. Liberal democracy in which ethnicity is more salient, it's more emphasized. Okay, because there is a majority. Of course, the majority is more powerful. They will do all kinds of things in such a system. They said, look, there's no such thing as ethnic democracy. And another criticism say, okay, you say you will create a model. What kind of model? You have to show cases. A model is something general. You cannot have you have just Israel, but you don't have other cases. So I have to show other cases. Okay, and then they said, look, it's unstable system. So maybe it's in transition, you can have it, but after all, it will change to something else. Okay, that's the idea. And then they say, look, in fact, the motivation for creating this model is to justify the system of Israel, which is not legitimate. It's not legitimate, this kind of, if Israel is this kind of democracy, it's not legitimate. So what you are doing, you universalize the system and you try to present it as something just, as something legitimate. So that's another criticism. Okay, I'm sharing with you all the criticism I have. Now, what I'm saying, if you look at ethnic democracy at macro level, general level, you can see its strengths. It has both strengths and weaknesses. The strengths of the system is it's a democracy after all, because it provides civil rights to all the minority and majority, and there is a competition for power and so forth. Okay, but also the system relieves the threats to the majority. The majority feels so threatened that by controlling the state, it feels more relaxed. It feels the threats are down. So it serves the majority. So this is one of its strengths, to serve the majority, which create this system. Of course, the weaknesses is that the majority enjoys power, privilege, and the minority suffers from institutional discrimination, exclusion, and also the whole idea of there is a problem of legitimacy. This system cannot get the legitimacy of the minority because it's not friendly to the minority. So that's generally speaking. Now let's continue. Let's now apply it. Before we apply it, let me try to show that Israel is not the only case of ethnic democracy. Israel is the prototype. This is the base for the creation of the model. It's fully ethnic democracy, as I will show. But Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and Turkey are other cases. Estonia, Latvia, and Slovakia, also another case. And the other case is Northern Ireland from 1921 to 1972. And India is changing also in this direction, from liberal to ethnic democracy. And there are, in the last 10 years, there are books about India calling it ethnic democracy or in the way of becoming ethnic democracy, using my own model, not just. Okay? Now, I studied myself, not only in Israel, I studied Northern Ireland. I have a couple of articles on Northern Ireland and also studied more carefully Estonia. I did field work in Estonia, a lot of interviews and so on. Okay, now let's talk about Israel. Okay, Israel, when we talk about Israel, what do we have in mind? I'm telling you what I'm going to talk about Israel, what kind of Israel I have in mind. I'm talking about Israel in its pre-67 borders. Not about the West Bank, not about Gaza, only Israel proper within the pre-67 borders. That's not including even East Jerusalem, because why? And because they are not citizens. I'm talking only about citizens, not others. And also I'm not talking about what happened in the last 2 years. It's not clear if Israel continues to be ethnic democracy. Maybe it's becoming ethnic non-democracy. That's a possibility. Okay, I will have to say something at the end, something positive about Israel. Okay, about the continuation of democracy. That's what, because there are a lot of people concerned if Israel continues to be a democracy at all, not just what kind of democracy, not democracy whatsoever. You know. Okay, so I'm talking about smaller Israel before 1960, the border before 1960, only about citizens of the state. Okay. Now let's talk about Israel from its point of view, how Israel perceives itself, how it presents itself to the world. Israel sees itself as a liberal democracy. Okay, liberal democracy. The only democracy in the Middle East. That's the way they say. As a matter of fact, except the anti-Israel left in the West as countries, as peoples, they see Israel as a liberal democracy. That's the way Israel is seen in the world. And they know that Israel is a procedural democracy. So it's not, the question if Israel is a procedural democracy or not, it's not really a question because it's clearly, it's procedural democracy. Now, it's clearly, if you include in Israel the West Bank and Gaza, Israel is not democracy at all. Because this big population, it's stateless. It doesn't have any political rights, no democratic rights. So it's clear that beyond the borders of 1967, including the West Bank and Gaza, Israel clearly not democracy. It's not a question if it's democracy or not. It's clearly not democracy. And I don't think there is a disagreement about it. Now, within Israel proper, okay, the question is if it is democracy. I say yes, it's a procedural democracy. The big question is if it's a liberal democracy. Okay. Most Israeli social scientists and law experts in Israel, they take it for granted that Israel is a liberal democracy. So this is why I am so much attacked in the literature that I'm saying, look, Israel is not liberal democracy. Okay? Because I don't accept the general consensus in the Israeli science, law science and social science that Israel is not liberal democracy. Okay, let's go. First of all, let's see what kind of state Israel is. Israel presents itself correctly as a Jewish and democratic state. Okay, let's take it as a Jewish. Israel is Jewish In what sense Israel is Jewish? In what sense you like Israel is Jewish? It was created by Jews. It's recognized internationally as a Jewish state. It has a Jewish majority of 80%. Israel's language is Hebrew. Judaism is the religion of the majority. Judaism is not formally recognized of Israel religion. Israel recognizes different religions. So it's not Judaism, it's not the state religion. But all its symbols, the symbolic system of Israel, it's completely Jewish, okay? Whatever you take, the name of the state, the emblem of the state, the flag, the anthem, the calendar, the days of commemoration, the names of places, the heroes, whatever you take, it is Jewish, okay? And if you go to Israel and you see the public space, it's Jewish. The public space is Jewish. It's very clear. Okay, so Israel is a Jewish state, no doubt about that. Now let's take Arabs. If you are not a Jew, okay, if you are not a Jew, what is your status? We are talking about 18% of the population is Arab. I'm talking about Arabs who live in Israel since 1948, and they granted citizenship after Israel was created. Now the Arab minority is non-assimilable minority, a minority which does not want to be assimilated into society, and the Israeli state does not want to assimilate Arabs. They want to keep Arabs and Jews separate. That's right. What was accepted by both sides. It's not something that the state imposing separation on Arabs. The Arabs want to be separated nationally because they belong to a different nation, Arabs and Jews. Okay? Now, Arabs are extended rights, full civil rights, individual rights, but not only individual rights, they have collective rights. The state gives to the Arab the rights to keep their religion, to keep their language, to keep separate education, fully funded by the state, because that's what they want. They want separate schools. So in order that their children will have the same language, the same culture, and Israel provide them with all the means to do that. And but Arabs in Israel at the same time, they reject Zionism. Zionism is the ideology of the state. The ideology which says that Israel is Jewish and should remain Jewish forever. Forever. And to make it sure that Israel will remain Jewish forever, you have to keep Jewish majority. And the idea is what can you do or what you are doing in order to make Israel Jewish forever. That's the idea of the state. Okay? Now, Arabs in Israel, because they reject ideology of Zionism, and they reject also the policies towards them, they struggling. They go to the with petition to the superior court. They go. They make parties. They go to the Knesset. They have their political movements and so forth. They struggle intensely. They struggle intensely. Okay. Okay, why Israel is what are the concerns of the Jews in Israel? What are the threats that Israeli Jews fear? There are three threats, three macro threats, something simple. One big threat of the Jews in Israel is the survival of the Jewish people. Not in Israel, in the world. Zionism was created to fight two threats on the Jews. One was anti-Semitism, and the other is assimilation. Assimilation is a danger from the Zion's point of view to the Jews. This means they disappear by assimilating, intermarriage, and dropping their language and their culture and so forth, and then they will disappear. So Israel feels this threat, feels not only threat, it feels its goal to make sure that the Jews will continue to be a separate people. Okay? The second threat, of course, is Israel itself to survive as a state, because it is surrounded by Arabs, by Muslims, who reject it as a state, and they oppose its very emergence as a state, and they continue with the war. And then you have the Palestinian people who reject Israel as a state. The Hamas is the best example. They want to do away with, not only with the state, by the Jews in the Middle East. Okay? So this is the second threat. But there is a third threat of that Israeli Jews and the Israeli state feel. That's about the Palestinian Arab minority. They are talking about 18 to 20% of the population who are not Jews, who are Arab, who are part of the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people is the enemy of Israel, and they are part of the enemy. And they reject also Zionism, which is the basic ideology of the state. And they want a different kind of state. In fact, what they want a binational state, like Belgium, like Switzerland, that Israel, of course, reject, because Israel wants Israel to be a Jewish state controlled by the Jews, not to be power sharing with Arabs. They don't want to share power with Arabs. Is this clear? There are three threats, big threats. Okay, how Israeli Jews see Israel as a state? They see a Jewish state as a goal for themselves. It's not just a regular state. They can live also in Britain or in France or in Brazil, any place they can live. But they see Israel as different in a sense because it's Jewish. It's not a regular liberal democracy. It is a Jewish state. So the Jewish state is a value for them. And they feel that it gives meaning to their life of living in a Jewish state. So a Jewish state is so appreciated by them. It's so important to them. They want control of the state because the state and them is the same. Their identity as a Jew and identity of. So ethnic democracy is a tool to deal with the threats they feel. The threat about the survival of the Jewish people, because in Israel there is no assimilation. All the Jews live there and they intermarry with each other. The state keeps Hebrew and keeps Jewish identity and so forth. So the best way to keep the Jewish people is to live in Israel. That's the idea. The second threat is the Palestinian threat or the Arab state against Israel. They say if you control the state, if the Jews control the state, they can recruit people to the army, as many as they can, and they have very strong army, and they can control also the immigration. They bring only Jews and so forth. Then the idea that the Jews will continue to control this to defend itself will be the best by them to control the state. And the third is about the Arab minority. If you control the state, then the Arabs will be down, and then you are in a good shape. Okay. Now let's take Israel as a procedural democracy. I said Israel is a democracy. I must say also Israel is a procedural democracy. If I say it's democracy, at least it is procedural democracy. But I'm trying to tell you that Israel is a diminished domination procedural democracy. Even if you take it at the basis, at the minimal requirements of democracy, you see that Israel, in fact, it is weak procedural democracy. I'm not talking about liberal. I'll show you later that Israel is not liberal. But let's start even with the basic about procedural democracy. Israel does not keep even the procedures well. Let me go one by one. Look, there is no constitution in Israel. This means that you can easily, the government can not obey the rules, obey law, because there is no constitution to limit it, to limit the government. So even the procedure, the government can break the procedures because there is no constitution. That's one reason. Other reasons that in fact there is no separation between powers, no real separation between parliament and the executive and government. Why? Because the Israeli structure, political structure is such that in order to have a government in Israel, you have to have a majority in the parliament. Without this, you cannot have a government. So if you have a majority in parliament, then you control the parliament. So there is no real distinction between parliament and government. This is the same. So that's another weakness of now, and no other protections of democracy. You see, you take the United States and many other countries, not just United States. You see, they have so many protections of democracy, which in Israel we don't have. What are the protections? I said no constitution. In the United States, you have a constitution. We don't have two parliaments. We have just one parliament. When you have two parliaments, the two parliaments, when they legislate, they have to cooperate. In Israel, one parliament, you can legislate what you want. Whatever the government wants, they can legislate. No problem, for them. Now, also, we don't have federalism in Israel. The whole system is just one unit. We don't have regional elections. What does it mean, regional elections? The parliament members are elected in a region, okay? This means that you vote for a parliament member personally. In Israel, you don't vote for Knesset members. You vote for parties. You don't even know who are the candidates of the party. You vote for the party. So when you vote personally for a member of parliament, the member of parliament has some power because he or she accounts to you, and if he or she does not represent you, then you will not vote for him or her next time. So our parliament members are very weak because the elections in Israel, what we call all the people are elected as one region. The whole country is one region. Okay. Now, also we don't have autonomy of local authorities. The local authorities in Israel are really governed by the central government. So it's so weak. Then as a procedural democracy is very weak. Now, another thing is Israel sees itself as defensive democracy. Means a democracy under threat, under security threats and other threats, not just security, a threat for its Jewish character, for its national character. I'll show you, there are all kinds of laws which restrict formally democracy, formally. You cannot in Israel today, or also in the past, you cannot form a political party which does not which denies Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. So you want to change Israel to make it binational or to make it a liberal democracy. You cannot do it. You cannot form a party because it's against the law. So there is no equality on competition for power because you cannot create a political party that challenge the ideology of the state. So you don't have the right as a voter to vote for a party to change the state. You don't have this. You cannot be elected also to change the character of the state. But there are so many other things that you cannot do. Today, for example, you cannot commemorate the Nakba. You know, Nakba is the disaster of the Palestine in 1948. You cannot commemorate that. If you commemorate that, there are financial penalties to any local organization or local government which legitimate such a celebration. But I don't have time to go over this. But believe me, there are so many limitations on Israeli procedural democracy, not liberal, procedural. What is that now? I have to go back now. No, this is the way to go back. Okay, now more limitation on Israel's procedural democracy. There is censorship of the press in Israel. There are all kinds of sensitive information you cannot publish in Israel. You cannot. There is censorship, military censorship in Israel. Now, since 1948, when there was the war of independence in Israel, this government declared emergency situation, that the state is under emergency situation. You know, emergency situation gives the government all kinds of authorities to whatever to do. Now, what happened to the emergency situation? The wars in April 1949 ended, and they had not peace, but ceasefire agreement and so forth. What happened to them, to the emergency situation? Remains till this day. Israel under permanent emergency situation, giving the government enormous powers. They not always use this power, but they have the power in the formally. They have the power to do whatever they want. So this is the Israeli situation. Okay? Now in Israel also there is a lot of religious coercion, which means that in procedural democracy you can do all kinds of things as individual. In Israel you cannot do as individual many things. For example, you cannot marry in Israel in civil marriage. You cannot divorce in civil, you cannot take a public transportation on Shabbat or on Jewish holidays because there is no transportation. So these are all kinds of religious coercion that you have in Israel. Okay. Now let's take another component of the Israeli system, which has more to do maybe with liberal democracy, which means the values. You know, liberal democracies, you fulfill values, not just procedure, values. Okay, so the idea is Israel has the right to be a Jewish state, like other nation states. The majority keeps its languages, state language, all this stuff. But in Israel, the situation is different. There is what I call exclusivity. It goes to the extreme. So you do it to moderate in nation state like France or other countries. You do it to a moderate way. In Israel, you do it in the extreme way. And they give you some examples. Okay? There is a law of return. There is in Israel a law of return. Okay, law of return that Jews can go to Israel and become citizens, and no problem. Okay, this is. But what about immigration law? You know, people who are not Jewish, they want to immigrate to Israel. Israel has, you believe it or not, Israel has immigration law. They did for non-Jews, immigration law. But they don't, Israel does not use it. So asylum law, Israel even doesn't have. Israel objects formally to have an asylum law. So no, people who have asylum, they cannot apply for asylum in Israel because there is no such law. There is no such law which permits this. Now Israel has a Jewish symbols, as we said. Okay, you can have a Jewish symbol, it's fine, because you have a majority of Jews and so on. But it's a state which doesn't have even one non-Jewish symbol, even not one. So it's exclusively Jewish. It goes to the extreme. Say Muslim or Arab holidays are recognized by the state. But for Arabs to abide by them, but the state itself does not declare, say, on an Arab a Muslim holiday, a day of rest. It's a day for rest for Muslims, okay? When it's a day of rest for Jews, everyone has a day of rest. So that's what I call exclusivity of this. Now, Israel, okay, the Jews are a majority, so they have a majority in government. But only Jews? Why only Jews? I mean, why a minority cannot participate also in power sharing? So even that you don't have. So what happened, and now I will go further to show that we cannot really talk about liberalism in Israel. No way to talk about it, from my point of view. Now in 2018, Israel legislated the nation-state law. Now, what is this nation law says? It says that Israel is Jewish, is the country of the Jews, and only of the Jews. It doesn't say that it is the country of Israeli Jews. It says the country of all the Jews in the world, and only to them. So if you live a Jewish in Brazil, okay, you own Israeli, you own Israel. But if you are an Arab in Nazareth, okay, who were there for centuries living there, and you are a citizen of Israel, the state does not belong to you. That's what this is. What this law says. It's 2018. It's not, many years ago or something. That's recently and was enacted by the right-wing government, of course, at that time. Okay? So this is one example of exclusivity and Jewish ascendancy in the situation. So
just right now, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. I thought I'm going to do it fast, and so I'm going to skip. So my message is that the left, the Zionist left, which created Israel, what I described so far, described a right-wing state. That's a right-wing state. This is a state where the Jews, as a nation, as a people, they control the state. The state just reflects their needs and helps them to relieve their threats, they perceive the threats and in fact, they give rights to the minority, but the rights are quite limited to the minority. This is exactly a kind of state which the right wing wants. It says compatible with their ideology that if you have a democracy, okay, you can have a democracy, but the democracy has to be inferior to the Jewish, to the national character of the state. So they accept democracy. They are not against democracy, the right wing. But democracy is a second factor. You accept it as long as it does not contradict the Jewish character of the state. That's what the left created in Israel. So what happened was a long transition from the 30s of the last century to the 70s of also of the last century, where the right wing was marginalized, using the power of the Zionist left to marginalize them. But with immigration to Israel, we changed the composition of the population. What the so-called left, Zionist left, lost its power. And the society and state, in fact, reflects the needs and threats of most of the Jews in Israel. That's what I'm claiming. Now, the idea is not the Palestinian question. From my point of view, the real big question for Israel is its character, the kind of democracy that Israel has, the kind of Jewish state that we will have. Is it exclusive Jewish state? Is it promoting also liberalism, liberal values? That's the big question. Now, the Palestinian question is derived from the view of what kind of society you want. The so-called left in Israel, Zionist left, whatever, center, whatever, not the right wing, they want Israel to be Jewish and democratic, not in the extreme sense that Israel is today. And the right wing wanted to make it, to weaken the procedural democracy, to weaken it further. It is weak already, but they want to weaken it further. They want to make Israel more Jewish. It is already extremely Jewish, but they want to make it even more Jewish. That's the idea. And let me, because I don't have time to go to show that how much time I can still have,
6 minutes.
6 minutes. Let me say something about Estonia. Estonia is a small country, 1.2 million people. That's all the Estonian people. And 100,000 are in the diaspora. And they have a minority of 30% Russians. Because Estonia was one of the republics of it was occupied in 1940 by the Soviet Union. They made it one of the republics of the Soviet Union, and they were against. I mean, the ethnic Estonians were against it. And then when the Soviet Union disappeared, they become independent. But they found themselves with 30% Russian minority, which is potentially disloyal because they are part of the Russian. They are Russians, How they want to keep their culture, they want to keep their majority. So they did whatever Israel did. They said we are under threat. So they took over the states for the ethnic Estonians. And they tried not to give citizenship to the Russians in 1991 when they become independent. They said, look, we give independence only to those who were citizens before 1940. before occupation by the Soviet Union. I mean, there were only 8% at that time, Russian citizens at that time. So they did all kinds of things. They make it very difficult to naturalize. And the first thing they wanted, they want to be part of NATO. So they will defend themselves against Russia because they were afraid. So they did all kinds of things to take over the country and to make sure that they will be in power, the Estonians. So they were fearful of the Russians inside and outside. Now, so the situation very much the same as the situation in Israel. And they say they are liberal democracy, of course. Israel says they are liberal, but they are really having ethnic democracy in Estonia. Now, so Israel and Estonia have much in common. They are ethnic democracies. They have enemies, they have threats, and they use the control of the state to deal with the threats that they are using. But Israel is this is the hardest type of ethnic democracy. Even when you compare it with Estonia, it's not the same situation. Because in Estonia, they are part of the European Union. There is peace. It's not the same. Israel is in a situation where it is in conflict with its surroundings. Israel is threatened by enemies. Now, Estonia is not threatened by enemies. Even if it has enemies, say Russia, but it has NATO. It has, and Estonian can go to EU and work there and whatever. It's not the same. Now, Estonia, the difference between Estonian and Russian in Estonia is language, mostly language and culture. And the policy of the government is to assimilate the Russians. In Israel, the policy is the reverse, not to assimilate, because to be a Jew is both ethnicity and religion. Not in Estonia. It's language, it's culture. You can change and assimilate. They see assimilation is a good thing to solve the situation. So they can easily change from ethnic democracy to liberal democracy. And they are changing in this situation. Let me finish by saying that the right wing goal now to change Israel radically. They see Israel created by the Zionist left. They want Israel recreated by the political right. They want to change the institution, the character of the society, the character of the state, to make it more politically right-winger. In fact, they don't have to do much work because Israel is already, right-wing. No separation between religion and state. Okay, Israel is Jewish, extremely Jewish. Democracy is weak and so forth. But it's not enough for them. They want to be a permanent majority, a right-wing majority. That's the idea. They want to be, for 40 years that they are already in power, they failed as a political right. And now I'm finishing to tell you that their failure is structural. They cannot achieve their goals. Why? For 3 reasons. Structural reason, not something which changing. One, that they don't have solution to the Palestinian question. They don't have any solution. They cannot annex the West Bank and Gaza. They are already controlling the West Bank and Gaza, but they don't want to give citizenship to these people. So in fact, they are creating apartheid state. And the world will not accept apartheid state. The Palestinians will not accept apartheid state. So they don't have solution to one of the most important questions in Israeli society. So in this sense, they are really weak. Now, the so-called central left in Israel, they have a solution. It's not practical so far, but it's solution to you separate, you partition the land, and you have two states, one Jewish state, and then where you have a Palestinian state. But the right wing doesn't have. Okay, that's one reason. The other reason is the right.
Time to finish.
This is it. Now the time. Okay, I'm finishing. Two minutes. The second problem they have, it's a real weakness. Who are their supporters? The supporters of the right wing in Israel are non-dominant groups. Groups which never been in dominance. This is Mizrahi Jews, non-European Jews. These are Russian, Ethiopians, and those who were used to be revisionist, who were marginal to the Israeli society before and after. So they are non-dominant groups. Now, not only non-dominant groups in the sense that they were not dominant politically in the past. They are in the lower classes. So who is supporting the right wing in Israel are lower classes. Now all the elites in Israel, except the political elite, all of them are not on the right wing. The economic elite is not politically on the right. The cultural elite, the judiciary is not. Media is not. Whatever elite you take in Israel, it's all controlled by the non-political right. Now, you cannot revolutionize society and do whatever you want if you don't get the support of the middle class and up. This is why you see in the last 2 years so much protest. Because it's very difficult. You want to change the elite, they want to change. They say, formally, they say one of our goals is to replace the elites. How can you change the elites in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years? It's impossible to do it. So that's another real weakness they have. And the third weakness is Israel is dependent on the West. Israel cannot just do whatever Israel wants. Cannot do the Palestinian what Israel wants, or the political right wants to do the Palestinian, or the right wing cannot do away with democracy as they wish and so forth. They cannot do it because Israel says we are part of the family of the West. We are members of the family of the West. You cannot ask the West to support you politically, economically, militarily, and so forth, and then you do whatever you want. You do the Palestinians and what you want, and you do with democracy what you want. So these are three big weaknesses they have. Then what is then my conclusion? My conclusion that the conflict in Israel about the character of the state, about how to resolve the Palestinian question and so forth, is continuing for a long time to come. It's not something you can solve here and there, that you have this government or another government. Change of government will not help you. There is a deep dissensus, deep disagreement among the Jews about the kind of state they want, the kind of peace or lack of peace they want with the Palestinians, and this will continue for a long time. And in my opinion, the right wing in Israel does not, with all the advantages they have, demographic and other advantages they have, they will not establish a permanent political right-wing control of society. They don't have this ability. They have dominance, but not permanent dominance. Thank you.
Tem perguntas do público? Tá. André, quer perguntar?
Well,
Microfone alto para ouvirem a pergunta dele.
yeah, I like to transpose a debate about democracy in Brazil to what you just said about Israel, if I may. There's some arguments that go more or less saying that even if you have some sort of formal procedural democracy, you shouldn't be calling that system of government democratic if there is significant socioeconomic inequalities that prevent people in terms of that translate into sheer inequalities of opportunity that translate into political differences and political inequalities as well, right? And then you presented a lot of when you talked about Israel, you presented a lot of limitations to the exercise of rights with the Arab population. But what about socioeconomic inequalities as well? How would you fit that into the model of ethnic democracy?
I said,
If you could
I had to
stop sharing the presentation so people
Okay.
can see your face.
stop. I should repeat the question.
It's not necessary.
Okay, no,
Just address. Yeah.
Look, in Israel, there is overlap between three conflicts or divisions. There is the class division, socioeconomic division. Then there is ethnic division. That's European secular Jews who founded the state. And there are in dominance in every field of life in Israel, except politics. Okay? And the third conflict is the political conflict. I spoke about it. The three go together. They are overlapping. The right wing draws its support from the lower classes. Okay? And from Jews, lower classes Jews, okay, and they have the right, and these people have right-wing ideology, religious, mostly religious or traditional, non-secular, because they are not all the same, but they are not secular. They are secular, but they are a small part. So you have three conflicts. Now, you say, what about the class conflict in this three conflict? This is the weaker of the three. People in Israel, they don't think in these terms, class terms. The left in Israel, as we heard from Professor Halamis, the left was not class oriented. They wanted to create a Jewish state. That's what they're all about. And their socialism is secondary. It was not really their most important thing they do. And after the state was established, they want to make one nation. The Jews will be assimilated within each other. They want to defend the state against the Arabs. They want to defend the state against Israeli Arabs, not only Arabs, and so forth. All kinds of things. Class is not. Now, many people say, look, why Oriental Jews or lower classes support the right wing? The right wing does not, they want a free market, right? Liberal economy. They don't want to close the socioeconomic gap. That's not what they want in life. So why they support it? Because for them, most important is not the socioeconomic situation. Most important that they want that the political party, the political right fulfills their aspirations, their thinking. They think in national terms. for them, the most important identity is to be Jewish, even not Israeli. For them, Jewish identity is more important than an Israeli identity, because Israeli identity include also Arabs. They don't want to. So they are more traditional. They are more traditionally religious. They have right-wing ideas in their mind. That's most important. And also the right wing in Israel accept them as Jews, not as inferior Mizrahi Jews, as Jews. Now the right wing, the left so-called center, they in fact reject them because they are not liberal enough. In the 50s and 60s, they were not modern enough. To accept them, they have to be modernized and liberal. But they are now today they are modernized, but not liberal. So they don't reject. They reject them. Now, what the center left offering now is these Jews. They don't offer them revolution, social revolution, redistribution of lands, redistribution of assets, of finance. They don't. Why they should? And the left center, they are the middle class and up. They will not give up their resources. So the whole question of social class in Israel doesn't have a base. It will have a base in Brazil, not in Israel.
I think we have to close because our translator is working 2 hours.
Guys, thank you very much. You too. You gave us a lot to think about. What I like is the Israeli verb. It's out of love for Israel, and I love it. Thank you. And
Thank you.
obrigada a vocês por nos assistirem. Sigam os nossos eventos no Centro de Estudos Judaicos no Instagram. E essa é mais uma noite em que a gente sai bem satisfeitos porque a gente promoveu a análise, o espírito crítico, divulgamos conhecimento e essa é a nossa pegada e vamos continuar assim. Obrigada, boa noite, gente.